What's up, everybody? Welcome back for the final time this season. We're here with some NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel for the big Super Bowl slate, Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. Welcome. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, Super Bowl single game $1 million winner. And in this video, what we're going to do, break down everything about this slate from a DFS standpoint. We will talk about the minor injuries that impact the slate, low risk lineup construction tips, and then we'll go through a variety of high risk angles for the largest contest on DraftKings and FanDuel. We will talk about what the field is going to do, ownership, the best captains and MVPs, uniqueness ideas, and what are the roles on both teams that we're certain about and the ones that maybe we could find an edge in. So make sure you stick around to the very end, all the way through the video for all of those details. So this is actually from a few years ago. This is my first big win. This is primarily what I'm known for in the DFS space. Won a solo milli in the Super Bowl. And a lot of the ideas, the lineup angles in this particular winning lineup that won $1 million, we'll talk about in this video. Now, the game has changed dramatically in the past few years, but some of the ideas that are still in this lineup we can apply to this game for the Eagles and the Chiefs, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. So let's start. And let's talk about the injuries on both sides here. And fortunately, there are very few. We don't have to really think about very many things. Kansas City is fully healthy. So everything we know about Kansas City remains true. No changes to be made there. On Philadelphia's side, there are a couple quote-unquote question marks. Kenneth Gainwell, their number 2 running back, is still dealing with the concussion. Remember, he got concussed in the conference championship game against the Commanders, but he is expected to clear protocol. He was out at media day, wasn't talking to media, but was out in the bright lights, so I assume he'll be okay. Limited in practice on Wednesday, and they are expecting him to play. If for some reason he cannot suit up, it will be Will Shipley as the number 2 running back, but he is $2,400. And so you look at the two prices between the guys, Gainwell 34, Shipley 24. Not a much of a difference. We know Barkley's going to take a vast majority of the snaps in this game anyways. The other one that may be a little bit concerning if you're just looking at the injury reports is Devontae Smith, the number 2 receiver for the Eagles. Didn't practice all last week in their estimation. It wasn't full practices by any means. Limited on Wednesday with that hamstring. However, he's talking to media. He said he's good to go for the Super Bowl. I imagine they are just being extra cautious with whatever ailment he has, or maybe it is just rest. But either way, we expect Devontae Smith to play and have a full workload. On the defensive side of the ball, they may get back, and it sounds like they will get back Brandon Graham, who's not in the player pool, obviously. If you played 7, 8 years ago when they had IDPs in the Super Bowl, that was a real thing for those of you who've played DFS for a while. But Brandon Graham should add to their pass rush. So if you like the Eagles or the Eagles defense in this game, that's another bump to them if they do get back Brandon Graham, and it sounds like they will. The other question mark that we had in the conference championship game that looks to be pretty fine for the Super Bowl is the offensive line for the Eagles. Cam Jurgens, remember, their center, did not play or wasn't expected to play, and then came in a little bit for in the conference championship game against the Commanders. He's fully practicing, and he's expected to play, as is Landon Dickerson, one of their top offensive linemen as well. So Philly should be fully healthy along the offensive line, which means we don't have anybody out in the positional spots. No real offensive line injuries to worry about. So whether or not this is a good thing or bad thing for DFS, basically what we know about these two teams will remain the same for the Super Bowl. So it could be pretty predictive from that standpoint, but it could also mean it could be a little difficult to get different. But don't worry, we got plenty of angles to think about that. Now, let's talk about low-risk lineup construction tips. Now, these are particularly for 50-50s, double-ups, head-to-heads. Half the field doubles their money. However, you can also think about this as what is the field most likely to do in all contests, and who are the most popular players in all contests. Knowing that, even though we're talking about low-risk lineups here, and you personally may not be building low-risk lineups for the Super Bowl, you can still use these ideas and know where you need to pivot in your high-risk contest. So if we start on DraftKings, and it's funny because when I'm on these shows with Jack, as we've done for the past couple of playoff slates, we look at all the industry sites. We try to see what the industry is projecting. We look at what optimal lineups are supposed to be. And there are quite a few industry sites that are projecting their optimal lineup for the Super Bowl, not to include Saquon Barkley. That's got to be bad. I don't care. If you're talking about low-risk lineups, there's no way that Saquon Barkley should be left out. So get Saquon Barkley in your low-risk lineup. I think that's pretty safe to say. If you've been watching our videos all year, you know we try to lock up all the scoring by playing both quarterbacks and both running backs. The issue with that in this game is twofold. One, we can play Saquon Barkley, we can play Jalen Hurts, we can play Patrick Mahomes. The issue is, and we'll talk about this in the high risk section, is the split backfield between the Chiefs in Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. Hunt $6,400. Pacheco is now priced down after the last couple of playoff slates. He is $5,200 on DraftKings. But again, they could throw a lot in this game. There's no guarantee that either one of these guys see the goal line touches. So we're not really locking up any scoring or playing any underpriced player by playing a Kansas City running back. So I think the best approach here for low risk contest is to some way, somehow get these three guys into your lineup. Barkley, Hurts, Mahomes. There's a massive tier gap between these three and the next group of projected players by any projection system. So make sure you get these three guys into your lineup and then figure it out from there. I think that's easily the way to do it. So the other issue with playing a Kansas City running back is you're leaving out the next group of popular players on DraftKings. And that next group, these guys will be higher owned in sharper contests. And I think you want one of these three at least in your low risk lineups because of how well they project based on their salary. Is Xavier Worthy for the Chiefs, now the number one wide receiver for the Chiefs, and he's just beginning more and more action as the season has gone on. It's obviously Travis Kelce with his target share in this offense. And then it's Dallas Goedert, who's had a great target share in the playoffs when all these guys have been available throughout the season. Goddard's been basically the number two, if not the number three option. And at just $5,800, he projects really well for his price tag too, especially when you consider the lack of values in general in this game, which is what we'll talk about in the high risk section. So I think one of Kelce, Goddard, or Worthy should be in your low risk lineup as well. And if you're playing Hunt or Pacheco, you're not able to get that done on DraftKings. So what I think you want to do here is get something like this. And because Barkley is so expensive, let's clear it. And we see that he is $18K at captain compared to Hurts and Mahomes are in the $15K range. I think you want to get one of Hurts or Mahomes instead. Let's just go with Mahomes as the favorite quarterback. Barkley, Hurts. Now you can play something like where you can get Dallas Goedert in there at mid-range. That leaves $3,400 left per player. And again, the values aren't great. And again, we will talk about this. But if we just need a couple points from these guys in low-risk lineups, which is generally all we need with this type of construction, we can certainly get that with someone like Jahan Dotson, Samaje Perine, Calcaterra, Justin Watson, something like that. I think Perine will be the most popular in low-risk lineups. And then you could play Hollywood Brown, Pacheco, Harrison Butker, Jake Elliott, or some combination of this. But I think these three plus Goddard is the way you want to go on DraftKings for your low-risk lineups. On FanDuel, it is definitely different. And it's still the same three we want to get into our lineups. Remember, there's no salary multiplier on FanDuel. But Barkley, Mahomes, Hurts, let's get these three guys into our lineups. And then you look at the Kansas City running back pricing. Hunt is 10.5, Pacheco 8.5, kind of the same pricing gap as we see on DraftKings. Neither one is that attractive at that price tag. What is interesting to me is the defenses were priced down compared to what they normally were. So if you look at optimal lineups for this, it's these three guys plus both defenses, which is like if just from a game theory and like a game script perspective, possibly the worst lineup you can think of. But if each of these defenses score a couple of points, this could be optimal. The issue is if any one of these three fail or another positional player goes off, or it's a high-scoring game, this lineup is pretty much dead in the water. So I think my preferred approach for low-risk lineups on FanDuel is to kind of do what we did on DraftKings and punt the last spot. So one of Juju, Dotson, Perine, Calcaterra, something like that. Let's put in Perine just for now. That leaves us 95. Then we can get in a kicker or Hollywood Brown. And I think that's the way you want to go on FanDuel for low-risk lineups. Is it the cleanest approach? No, definitely not. But it's a tough game overall with the lack of value, especially from the Philly side. So I think that's the way you want to go for low-risk lineups. And just think about that. It's the big three, Barkley, Mahomes, Hurts. The next three most popular guys are Goddard and Xavier Worthy and Travis Kelce. And then you have the variety of punts to mix in. Now, let's transition. Let's talk about high-risk contests, which is why most of you are joining the show here in trying to win that $1 million prize on both sites. $1 million up for first on FanDuel, $1 million up for first on DraftKings. So what I'm going to do is talk about what the field's going to do, what our numbers are telling us, what are the certain situations we know about, where are some situations where there could be some uncertainty that the field is under projecting, and then what are some different uniqueness ideas in the largest contest to get different. And even if we don't win $1 million, maybe we only split it with a couple people. I'm sure you'd be happy with, 200, 300,000? I'm sure you'd be fine with that. So let's talk about those ideas. So let's go back to DraftKings. And let's start with, you know what I want to start with actually? If you're a member, you know about this at OccupyFantasy.com, but if you're not, you may not know about this. Every year we put out a props guide for the Super Bowl. Moose and I, Moose is our other co-founder. We used to go to Vegas every year. Now with legal sports betting, Moose is actually out in Vegas now, but I bet it here at home from the comfort of my home. But we go through and we project every prop for the entire game, and we come through and we print out a guide for you on how to use this guide and what the line should be, the line to look for, when to bet it for every single prop in the game. Now, this is great for betting because one, you can line shop and get the best possible expected value on the line. Plus, our research gives you the best possible edge as well. But you can also use this for DFS lineups as well. Part of the reason I won the $1 million in that Rams and Patriots Super Bowl is because all of our props were telling us that this should be an under game. All of our props research was telling us that we should be betting quarterback unders. And it's a big reason why I made a good chunk of zero quarterback lineups in this game. A good reason why I played defenses in a good chunk of my lineups in that game. So what's the props guide telling us this year? It's very Philadelphia heavy. It's very pro Philly. So Philadelphia heavy lineups, unders on Kansas City guys, which can be scary because Kansas City is a different beast in the playoffs. Kansas City defies a lot of the numbers in the playoffs, and the props guide may not capture that. But if you're looking for edges, our props guide is saying Philly captains, Philly players, down on Kansas City. So we can use that to our advantage as well. And that's a little bit different than what the field is doing. If we look at what we expect the field to do on both sites, it's mostly going to be balanced lineups, three Eagles, three Chiefs. But if there's a lean in any direction, it is Kansas City. We expect more 4-2 and 5-1 Kansas City lineups than we do Philly. We expect more 3-2 and 4-1 Kansas City lineups on FanDuel than we do Philly lineups. So if we flip that, if we just ignore everything else, that's one angle of uniqueness we can play in this game is playing more Philly heavy lineups. And the props and our model, especially at the top, really agree with that. Now, the issue with that, however, is Philly, like some games we've talked about on this channel before, we know where the ball is going. They're very top heavy in their target and touch distributions, and they don't rotate many guys, which makes it tough to find any value and tough to lean into any uncertainty on their offense. Kansas City, however, they have some rotational guys, especially at receiver. We have the unknown in the backfield. So because of that, that's why the field is building so Kansas City heavy or balanced with a slight lean towards Kansas City, is because we have so many more cheaper options on Kansas City side than we do Philly side. So what I'm going to do now is talk about the roles that we know and the roles that we don't know where we could potentially gain an edge. And the roles that we know are mostly on Philly side. We know that Barkley is going to get almost all of the touches. I think he's got 110 snaps compared to, 12 or 15 for Kenneth Gainwell throughout the playoffs. We know Barkley's getting 90 to 95% of the touches for Philadelphia. Now, again, this is assuming no injuries, no chaos in the game. Philadelphia's wide receivers. We know it's Jalen Hurts. We know it's A.J. Brown, and we know it's Devontae Smith. And then we know it's Jahan Dotson as the wide receiver 3. We look at the routes run in the playoffs for the Philly wide receivers, Brown, Smith, and Jahan Dotson. It's A.J. Brown has run 90 routes. Devontae Smith has run 88 routes. Jahan Dotson has run 66. And the next closest player has run 9 routes in that receiver room. It's Johnny Wilson. So we know these three are going to be on the field. We know Dotson doesn't get the ball that much when he's on the field. He only has 2 targets in the playoffs. It's all through A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. A.J. Brown, 15 targets in the playoffs. Devontae Smith, 8. That number was a little bit tighter during the regular season. So there's no uncertainty here. These guys are going to be on the field. We look at their tight end spot. We know it's Goddard and Grant Calcaterra. Goddard in the playoffs, 80 routes. Calcaterra, 19 routes. Let's find Calcaterra. Where are you, buddy? There you are. And you look at targets, it's Goddard 12, Calcaterra 3. Calcaterra basically a target a game. So we got Dotson a target a game. We got Johnny Wilson may see a handful of snaps, maybe 1 target. We have Calcaterra a target per game. We have Kenneth Gainwell maybe seeing 5 to 10 snaps. And that's it. That is literally it for the Eagles. That's why it's so tough to build Philly heavy, and that's why the field won't do it as much. Now, on Kansas City side, what we do know, we know Xavier Worthy is the number 1 wide receiver. We know Travis Kelce is one of their top two receiving options. Worthy, 13 targets in the playoffs on 63 routes. Kelce has 12 targets on 61 routes. After that, yes, Hollywood Brown has been seeing more work in the playoffs. Yes, Juju Smith-Schuster has operated as the wide receiver 3. Yes, Noah Gray runs a decent amount of routes. But they still have DeAndre Hopkins. They still have Justin Watson. And then you look to the running back room with Hunt and Pacheco. Hunt has led the way. Yes. We look at touch and opportunities for these two guys throughout the playoffs. And it's been Hunt 62 snaps, Pacheco 35. You look at routes, it's 27-19 in favor of Kareem Hunt. You look at touches or carries, it's 25-10 in favor of Kareem Hunt. And you look at targets, actually 3-2 in favor of Isaiah Pacheco. But then you have Samaje Perine mixed in at the bottom, who is their two-minute drill running back, their third down running back on third and longs. He could play a factor in this game depending on the game script and how many 2-minute drill opportunities they get. And you look in the playoffs, he's played 22 snaps, about 2/3 of the amount of snaps of Isaiah Pacheco. He's run nearly the same amount of routes, though, 16 routes compared to 19 for Pacheco, and he's seen 2 targets in the 2 playoff games. So Perine is in the mix as well. So we have a 3-headed backfield. And I think it would be a mistake to say that this has happened in the first 2 playoff games. This is what's going to happen in the Super Bowl because, one, Perine's role is very game script and situationally dependent. And there was a national report a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was James Palmer, who said it was a very nonsensical report, but it was like the Chiefs want Pacheco to be the lead guy, but his leg might not be healthy, so they're going to give it to Kareem Hunt, but you never know. They're going to ride the hot hand. It was very non-committal to what they want to do. I believe that they do want Pacheco to be the guy, and his return from injury hasn't been that great. Now he's got another 2 weeks off. If you look at ownership, neither one is that popular. Pacheco's still lower owned, under 20% projected right now. In a situation where they have 2 weeks to prepare and where they're going to ride the hot hand, we can take some uncertainty in playing Pacheco over Hunt or Perine over both of these guys. Or maybe you're of the belief that Pacheco's not going to factor in and Perine won't factor in. You can play Hunt heavily. Either way, you can go heavy on one of these 3 guys or maybe overweight on all of them if you expect Kansas City to be leading or trailing depending on the game script. Either way, it is an opportunity to attack because there is some uncertainty in the air. Now, if we go look at the wide receiver situation for Kansas City, and after Xavier Worthy, it's Hollywood Brown, it is DeAndre Hopkins, Juju Smith-Schuster, it's Justin Watson. Let's look at their opportunity in the playoffs so far. It's been Hollywood, 52 routes, 7 targets. DeAndre Hopkins, 26 routes, 3 targets. Juju Smith-Schuster, 36 routes, 4 targets. And you look at Justin Watson, 9 routes, 0 targets. We know Justin Watson's a deep threat. How about the ownership for each of these guys on DraftKings? Hollywood, extremely popular. One of the most popular mid-range guys along with Dallas Goedert. Hopkins will be very unpopular. Hasn't done much in the playoffs. Juju will be popular for a punt, right? 10, 15, 20% depending on the contest that you're in. Justin Watson will be 1 to 2% owned. So, do they want to continue to trust Juju as the wide receiver 3? Do they want to continue to trust Hollywood as their number 2? D-Hop, the veteran, we've been talking in these videos all year. Do they want to keep saving him? What are they saving him for at this point? Or is he washed? I don't know. But if there's a game they're going to unleash him, it would be the Super Bowl, I would think. So I think you have to take some shots on DeAndre Hopkins as a lower-owned player in this group. And then if you're looking for a punt, Justin Watson, we know he can catch a deep pass. So I think you have to consider him as well. The other guy, I mentioned him briefly, is Noah Gray, who if you look at in the playoffs, has 3 targets on 25 routes in 2 games. Put up the goose egg last week or 2 weeks ago. But his role has been game dependent as well. There's been some games where he's played 50, 60, 70% of the snaps. There's been some games where he hasn't. And we don't know their exact game plan for this game, this matchup. But Noah Gray coming off the 0 last week, we don't expect him to be popular. We expect him to be low owned as well. Has a decent average depth of target. Noah Gray is a great high risk play in this game because he has the playing time and the receiving upside that not many other guys do in this range. All right, I think I covered all of the unknowns or the unclear spots. If you guys have questions about that, drop a comment below the video. I will answer them. I'm recording this Thursday morning, so we have 4 days basically until the Super Bowl starts. Happy to get back to any comments that you have. Let's move on. Let's talk about the kickers and defenses. And again, just because I was highlighting these guys on DraftKings, all the same applies on FanDuel. All the roles aren't going to change on FanDuel. It's just the pricing. If you look at the quote unquote cheap guys, where those tiers are on DraftKings, it's below the defenses, right? So Eagles Chiefs are 42 and 4K respectively. Hopkins is 44, but then we have Gainwell, Gray, Juju, Dotson, P. Ryan, Calcaterra, Justin Watson. We go over to FanDuel, and again, like I said, they priced down the defenses to 8K over here. Under them, it's Gainwell, Gray, Juju, Jahan Dotson, Samaje Perine. D-Hop is just above them over here as well. So the pricing gaps are kind of similar on both sides. All right, defenses and kickers. Defenses are one of the easiest ways to get unique in any Super Bowl because there are two good teams, usually high scoring, usually projected to be high scoring. But again, they will be more popular on FanDuel. I mean, we're seeing 10 to 20% projected ownership depending on the contest. I would prefer not to play them at 10 to 20% in this game. I would prefer to play them on DraftKings where they're going to be 5 to 10%, maybe 12, 13%, depending on the contest. So it depends on the site you're playing on, and it depends how you expect this game to go. The issue is both teams average less than a turnover per game. Neither team really gives up special teams or defensive touchdowns. So where does the scoring come from? Ideally, sacks. Our props guide is big on the over in sacks in this game. So if there's a sack, strip fumble, maybe a defensive touchdown from that way, that's how the defenses get there. But it's a really tough matchup for the defenses to score well. And at their price tags, 4K, it's not like they're super, super cheap. So it's really interesting. It's really tough. If you want to build with the defense, though, the way that they are optimal with the way these two teams play is a lower scoring game. So leaving more salary on the table, playing less quarterbacks, maybe playing an extra kicker, more running backs. That's how you want to build if you want to build around defenses being optimal in this game. Kickers, both are excellent options. Two high-scoring offenses. Both defenses allow about the league average in field goal attempts per game from their opponents. And our model likes Harrison Butker. Our props guide likes Jake Elliott a little more. Both guys are great plays. Mix them in. Butker 5K, Elliott $4,800. I imagine Elliott as the underdog will be a little bit less popular. So hasn't been that great from 50 yards and beyond this year, but those things can be fluky from time to time. So both guys are great plays. We look at their prices on FanDuel. They'll be less popular over here because they are 9K and they're right around Hollywood Brown, right around Dallas Goedert. So kickers, always great plays in Showdown. That is no different in the playoffs. All right, we've talked about kickers, defenses, all the positional players. Let's transition. Let's think about captains and MVPs. Brian, who should I play captain MVP in my GPPs for this game? So I don't think it should be a surprise, but it's going to be the big three as the most popular captains: Barkley, Hurts, Mahomes. Now, a lot of projection systems are spitting out Mahomes as the most popular captain. I'm not sure it gets there, just based on his average points per game, the influx of casual players we'll have in the larger GPPs on both sites. I think in sharper contests, we'll see Hurts and Barkley a little more owned. But really, the sharper guys, and I mentioned them in the low-risk section, guys whose ownership will be increased at captain compared to the largest contests, in sharper contests, is Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, and Dallas Goedert. Those guys project a little better than their salary indicates. So I don't think either one's going to be 15, 20%. All the ownership's going to reside in Barkley, Hurts, Mahomes. But we'll see Worthy, Kelce, Goddard get 10 to 15, I think, maybe 10 to 12, depending on the contest, and higher in high-dollar contests. So those are the big six captains to consider. And there are a decent amount of low-owned flex plays. If you want to play those guys, that's fine. What stands out to me, and he's number 2 in our model, is A.J. Brown. He is projected for less than 10% captain ownership on DraftKings. His wide receiver mate, Devontae Smith, is projected for 5% captain ownership. Yes, they haven't done that much in the playoffs. Yes, Kansas City is a tough matchup. But we get explosive guys like A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in this game at sub 10%. The largest GPPs, you have to consider. You absolutely have to consider them as high-risk captains on DraftKings. I think for smaller GPPs, can they get there in larger contests? Sure, if the game breaks the right way. But it's Goddard and Hollywood Brown. Because they have good points per dollar projections, our model and definitely our props guide vastly prefers Goddard in this range. Really good small field plays because they allow you to fit an extra stud in. Because if you look at this, right, you play Barkley, Hurts, Mahomes, you have 3,800 left per player. for the final 3 spots. If you just swap this and put Goddard at the captain, now we put Barkley in, that leaves us 44.50 for the final 2 spots. So a little bit of an upgrade there. We can get an extra, a few extra bucks for one of our final 2 players. So really like this approach in small field GPPs playing Goddard or Hollywood Brown. Now on FanDuel, it's really hard to see when you look at the projections and just everything we know about these guys. It's really hard to envision a scenario where Barkley, Mahomes, or Hurts is not the optimal MVP. But if we're trying to beat 158,000 people and 90 to 95% of the MVP ownership is in these 3 guys, I think we have no choice but to look at A.J. Brown, Travis Kelce, Xavier Worthy, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert in this game environment. Because we know all of them have multi-touchdown upside. So if we can get multiple touchdowns to a positional player, we're looking at 1 to 2% MVP ownership and competing with way, way, way less of the field than if we were at 20% plus on Barkley, Mahomes, and Hurts. I think if you're playing multiple lineups in largest GPP, what I would do is it's one of 2 strategies. I think you would pick one of Barkley, Mahomes, or Hurts, your favorite one, the one you want to build around the most, and go all in on that one. So let's say you like Barkley the most. Can't blame you for that. Go all in on Barkley, and then you don't play Mahomes or anybody else at MVP. It's just all your lineups have Barkley at MVP. That way you give yourself as many lineups as possible if you're right about Barkley being the optimal MVP. Or, and this is a much more high-risk approach, but has a better chance for $1 million, I think, is not play any of Barkley, Mahomes, or Hurts, and you mix in 10 to 15 to 20% of A.J. Brown, Kelce, Worthy, Devontae Smith, Goddard, the guys we just talked about. And yes, is that likely to lose? Sure. But if it's right, you're going to be competing with a lot less people, and you're going to have 10 to 20% leverage on every single MVP that you use, which is pretty nice compared to just going all in on one guy. Both are viable options. It really depends on your risk tolerance and your ability to build with or without a popular MVP on FanDuel. All right, let's finish out with some final uniqueness ideas for both sites. Our NFL manager, Chris Rooney, who is writing our daily plug this week, will be up at occupyfantasy.com, where he's going to give his personal rankings, his lineup construction tips, his overall slate notes, deep dive onto the slate. Make sure you go check that out. That'll be up probably Friday, so make sure you go read that. He had a great idea that he was telling me about, and I really like this idea for uniqueness because we know the field's not going to do this. It's playing a Kansas City pass catcher at captain on either site, mostly DraftKings, but either site. So let's say you like Xavier Worthy, right? We play him at captain. Let's try to play him at captain. Now, a vast majority of the field is going to build Xavier Worthy captain lineups with his quarterback because that makes the most sense, right? If Worthy is catching touchdowns, it's probably from Mahomes. But because of Jalen Hurts' rushing ability and because specifically of Xavier Worthy's rushing ability, he gets design touches on end arounds, there is a very real possibility that the optimal lineup has Hurts instead of Mahomes. Now, if both these guys score a lot of points and they're both optimal, it's going to be really tough to win anyways. But if this happens, where Mahomes scores 10 to 15 points, Hurts scores 25, and Worthy scores 20, 25 himself, you're competing with very few people who are going to do this. The same happens for FanDuel as well. Now, again, this is an extremely high-risk approach because Worthy has to be the optimal player, and Hurts has to outscore Mahomes. Much more unlikely on FanDuel because of the lack of a salary multiplier. This is more of a DraftKings specific approach, but you can work on both sides. Really love this. We want to do this when the quarterback of the pass catcher either isn't that great for fantasy. Not necessarily the case here. Mahomes has been great for fantasy in the playoffs with his rushing ability. But when you have a guy who can score multiple touchdowns on the ground for the opposing team at quarterback, this is a great uniqueness construction that very few lineups will do. So I really love this approach, and shout out to Chris for that idea. Finally, salary usage. When we have a lack of value, we've talked about this in the Showdown videos all year, it's really tough to leave salary because guys at the bottom aren't scoring enough to outscore guys much higher up. But the one way you can do this is you look at my $1 million win. This left $2,200 left in salary because it was a lower scoring game because it had 0 quarterbacks. It had a defense in it. So when you use a defense, you can naturally use less salary. So... And also, by the way, pricing was super soft a few years ago compared to these days now. So pricing much tighter now, which makes it a little bit tougher to leave that much salary in a Super Bowl lineup. But I think either you have to play multiple low-owned guys in the large GPPs or leave 500 or more, 1,000 or more. And the other way to leave salary is if you truly believe, and again, this is FanDuel line of thinking, if you think someone like Xavier Worthy or Goddard or Hollywood Brown can be the highest scoring player on the slate, then you can play them at captain. Let's freaking play them at captain. And you can leave enough. Let's just say Kelsey. I'm just going to build a random lineup here. And let's go with Dotson just for this lineup. 3,900. This is tough, right, for this to happen. Because what you could do in this type of lineup, you can swap these two. Barkley, I don't know why I refuses to put them at captain when I first try. And then Goddard, right? So we're leaving enough salary to where Barkley can be swapped. But if Goddard outscores Barkley, no one's going to do this because they can upgrade to Barkley whenever they want. So leaving enough salary to where you can upgrade, this is a large field play only, for a mid-range or a cheaper captain, it's a great way to get unique, but that player has to be the highest scoring player on the slate. That depends on your confidence in Goddard, Worthy, Kelsey, anyone else that's not Barkley, Hurts, Mahomes doing that. So I think I gave you quite a few ideas here. A little recap. There's uncertainty in the Kansas City running back room, wide receivers, backup tight ends. Philly, we know what they're going to do. Leaving salary is tough. Defenses not as popular on DraftKings as they are on FanDuel. Tough for them to score well, but if they do, lower owned on DraftKings, we can leave more salary, get unique that way. We like unpairing Kansas City captain pass catchers and pairing them with Hurts instead. And all the positional players outside of Kelsey, Worthy, Goddard are going to be extremely low owned at captain. So lots of ways to play this. A super exciting game. But there is a possibility for massive duplications if we don't get some chaos. But it's the Super Bowl. We always get some sort of chaos with 2 weeks to prepare. So our model is up and running. OccupyFantasy.com ranks every player for DraftKings at FanDuel. Our projected ownership will be up either later tonight or on Friday. Daily plug, OccupyFantasy.com. And the lineup builder, same lineup builder I used to win $1 million that you can use. It's up and running. And you can use all the rules that is in our Showdown guide and in our daily plug to build profitable Showdown Super Bowl lineups. Final plug. Our props guide, if you're not sure where to find it, is in our Discord, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. It's for members only. Link is in the description, but every prop you could possibly think of in this guide, and even if you're not betting, you can use this to guide your DFS lineups. Invaluable tool. So, Brian from Occupy, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, go ahead and comment on the video below. I will answer any question you have through Sunday. Let's see if we can get, 1,000 likes on the video? I think we can do that. Give us a thumbs up. And if you like other DFS content, make sure to subscribe to our channel here because we're doing videos all the way through the spring and summer. And then until football returns, we'll be right back at it once again. Appreciate everyone for taking this ride with us all NFL season long. We absolutely appreciate you. Thanks for joining, and good luck in the Eagles and Chiefs Super Bowl.